So I just posted a video about the incredible Underground2.net mod, and noticed that a lot of folks were asking for guides not just for that, but for Underground 2 modding as a whole, and a lot has changed since my last video on that topic. So today, I'm going to cover the basics of getting UG2 running well and looking great on your system, and then we'll dive into a guide for pretty much every mod that I recommend, most of which are things that I feel like every player would enjoy. It's a very vanilla-friendly mod list that doesn't take away from the original experience. Just like with my last guide, this tutorial will begin with a clean, unmodded copy of Underground 2 already installed. If you're wondering where to get the game, there is no officially supported way to buy it from a digital storefront. So you will need to find a copy on your own, because I can't really show you where to get one without this video getting taken down. For this video, I'll be using the US version of the game, updated with the 1.2 patch. If you're running into an issue where the game won't launch and is asking you for disk 2, you can click View in the top left of the install folder and make sure that File Name Extensions is checked. Then right-click anywhere in the folder, create a new text document, and title that document Foobar, F-O-O-B-A-R. Then just remove the .txt extension and click Yes to the Windows prompt, and you should now be able to launch the game. Okay, so with a running copy of Underground 2 with the 1.2 patch, let's get modding. And the first mod we need is Underground2.net. This mod greatly enhances the game's visuals without changing its art style, adds a lot of extra vanilla-friendly car customization, and it also includes a bunch of other very important mods that we would otherwise have to install individually. This is why UG2.net is such a great base to start with. It gives us a one-click install for a majority of the mods that we need. And when I say one click, I really do mean it. The UG2.net install is incredibly easy. You can download the mod from the link in this video's description, then open up the zip that was downloaded, open up folder 1 for the mod files, and then all you need to do is select everything here and drag it into your game's install folder. That's it, you just installed the UG2.net mod pack. Now, while we're here, just in case you want to revert back to the original launch menu at any point, instead of the new Underground2.net one, you can open up the original main menu background folder and copy this front end folder over to your game's install directory. Just be sure to do this after you install the mod itself. Alright, now let's spend some time going through the different options you now have with UG2.net installed. Open the scripts folder in your install directory, and everything here with a .ini extension is a settings file. You can open these up in Notepad and change whatever you need to. We're going to skip over the ReShade presets, I'll cover those later, and start with the animation controller. This is a mod that lets you assign hotkeys to do things like open your hood, trunk, or doors at any point in the game. At the top, you can see various settings, which in most cases should just be left default, and under hotkeys, you can select what button will do what. To change these, just type the input you want. For example, let's say I want D on my keyboard to open and close my doors. I'll just type D here, save the file, and then in-game, I can press D on my keyboard to open and close the doors. So that one's pretty simple. Next, we'll look at the stance mod, another option included with UG2.net. This mod changes the already existing suspension upgrades for adjustable camber plates and coilover suspension system to also add some offset and camber angle, which greatly improves the wheel fitment of pretty much every car in the game. You can change how much camber gets added by raising or lowering this value. I personally keep it a bit more conservative, and then I do space out the wheels quite a bit by setting this to 1.7. Maxing it out at 2 will cause clipping issues in a couple of cars if you're also running low camber, but 1.7 feels like the sweet spot for good spacing without any clipping issues. If you want to, you can also enable the tire width setting by changing this value to 1, and then at the bottom can set how much you want every tire in the game to be widened by. I do think 1.25 is a good value, but you can of course play around with it. Nothing needs to be adjusted for the car sound tuner, so we'll leave that file alone, and instead check out extra options. This is a very popular mod for Need for Speed games that gives players a lot of extra options for their gameplay experience. If you're looking for standard vanilla gameplay, then there really isn't much you need to change here except for the unlock all things option. If you want to keep cars and upgrades locked behind game progression, make sure to set this to 0. And as a quick troubleshooting tip, some players run into an issue where the cars won't unlock in-game when they're supposed to. In that case, all you need to do is restart the game. You'll also notice that this mod includes the unlocker for regional cars. By default, the US version of Underground 2 got an Acura RSX and Honda Civic, while the EU version got the Peugeot 106 and Vauxhall Corsa. This mod gives you all 4 as long as you keep this set to 1. Now you can feel free to look through the other settings here and tweak anything you want, but I'm going to go ahead and move on to HD reflections. This mod does what it sounds like, improves reflections across the whole game. If you have a pretty beefy PC, you can turn up a few settings here. Vehicle and road scale can be set as high as 1 to get full resolution reflections at the cost of some performance, or you can turn this setting down a bit to save performance. Although honestly, if you're looking for that, I'd just turn off the HD reflections by setting this to 0. Another setting you can turn on to improve reflection visuals is the extended render distance. You can also see options down here for improved motion blur and more realistic chrome reflections. I personally leave the motion blur off and turn on the chrome, but this is all up to you. Now let's look at the NFSU2 unlimiter settings, because there are a couple of important options here. If you plan on adding modded cars to the game, I'd suggest turning on the all new cars can be driven by AI setting, in order to let the AI drivers use modded cars too. And you might also want to turn on force stock parts on add-on opponents, depending on which add-on cars you choose to install. This option essentially turns off the randomized body kits for NPCs that are using modded cars, in order to avoid issues with some less complete mods that have missing parts. This is so that you don't see other cars driving around without front or rear bumpers, for example. All the mod cars I will recommend in this video, however, don't need this setting to be turned on. So if you only want to add my recommended list of add-on cars, leave this off. Finally, at the very top, you can choose whether or not to let modded cars unlock right away or have them unlock through game progression. Keep in mind that the unlock all things setting in extra options will override this. Alright, now let's look at one of the most important settings files, the widescreen fix. At the top, you can see options to set the game's resolution. On most hardware, you can actually just leave this at 0 and it will auto-detect your native resolution. However, in some situations like on Linux or Steam Deck, the game can't auto-detect your resolution and won't boot because of it. So it's a safe move to just type in your resolution anyway, and obviously if you want to run something besides your monitor's native resolution, you can change that here. As an important note, the resolution setting in-game will show up incorrectly, and this is totally fine. Just leave it as is and adjust resolution through the .ini file instead. Moving down, we have a couple more important settings. You can enable the skip intro setting in order to skip through the videos that play when you launch the game, and choose what type of window to play the game in, just in case you maybe want a bordered window or something, but option 4 should work for most players. You can also select improve gamepad support to add console-specific button prompts to all the buttons in the game, and adjust your controller's steering dead zone as well, which I would definitely recommend if you have a decent controller. You can change frame rate limit here too by either selecting a multiple of your monitor's refresh rate, or just typing in the exact FPS limit you want. I recommend locking the game to 60. You can certainly try higher, but it might introduce shifting or audio issues on some hardware. Here we can also set single core affinity. When set to 1, the game will only use a single core on your CPU, which prevents crashing problems on modern computers. I would heavily recommend leaving this on unless you really need some extra performance and feel okay with experimenting to see if the game crashes on your hardware. hardware. And that is all the major settings covered. Now is when I'd recommend just booting up the game, loading into a quick race, and making sure that everything functions, looks good, and runs well. You'll know that UG2Net is installed if you see this loading screen, and then see this tuned Supra against a new background. If you've got everything running well, great. But here are a few very common troubleshooting steps to know about just in case. Let's start with controller support. This game does support just about any controller on PC, and depending on your controller, it might just work out of the box, or you might need to download some extra tools. If you're on an Xbox or similar modern controller, you might need extended input. The link for this is in the video description. Make sure you download the UG2 pack, then unzip the folder and copy scripts and dinput8.dll into your Underground 2 install directory. Once that's done, you can open up the extended input settings to adjust dead zones and button mapping. If you need a reference sheet to know what buttons to map to what, open and use the event reference file that came with the mod. Now, if you're using a PS4 or PS5 controller instead, you need something called DS4 Windows. Download it here and install the program. Then once done, just make sure that DS4 Windows is running while you launch the game, and you should be all set. Let's cover a couple more common issues. If you ever run into a bug where parts are missing on cars, often showing up with invisible fenders, this likely means that you loaded an old profile from before you installed mods. Mods like UG2Net and car add-ons themselves won't work with existing save files, so when you mod the game, make sure you create a new profile. If you see these dark, square, blocky roads in the distance, you need to enable or turn up anisotropic filtering. This is usually done in your graphics card's control panel. For me, on an NVIDIA card, the setting can be found right here in the Manage 3D Settings tab. And the process is basically the same for AMD users. If you're on Steam Deck or otherwise don't have the option for this, you instead need to create a file in your Underground 2 install directory and title it dxvk.conf. And then place this text inside that file, and then you'll be all set. Now let's talk in-game graphic settings and ReShade. You can of course make adjustments depending on your own specs, but generally on any modern hardware, you should be able to max everything out. There are just a few important settings to keep in mind. To start, make sure you keep anti-aliasing off in the in-game settings if you're using ReShade. ReShade comes installed with SMAA, which looks better. Overbright and enhanced contrast should always be off as well. And VSync should be kept on. This helps prevent cars from shaking around in cutscenes when playing on higher frame rates. And just in case you do still happen to have that issue, even with VSync on, you can disable high FPS cutscenes in the widescreen fixes.ini as a workaround. Now for ReShade, this is a post-processing injector that can be used for all sorts of games, and it comes pre-installed with UG2Net along with 4 presets. You can bring up its menu by pressing delete on your keyboard. You can toggle the effects on and off by pressing the End key, and you can rotate between presets by pressing page up and page down, or just by selecting them in the menu. Find the preset you like the most, or search online for new ones, or if you're more comfortable with ReShade, you can even make your own. Finally, if for whatever reason you don't want to use ReShade, just rename the reshade.asi file extension to something else. And make sure to turn the in-game anti-aliasing back on if you do. Alright, I know that was a lot to cover, but UG2Net is a very big mod, and I'd rather give you too much info instead of too little. Now, even though UG2Net already does a lot to make the game look much better, there are still a couple more enhancements we can make, specifically surrounding the UI and HUD. We're going to use the mods Upscaled HUD and Detailed Map to make things look much better. And for both of these, we need something called binary. So go ahead and grab both of the mod files first, and then download the latest version of binary. Once that's done, extract the binary folder to wherever you want to keep this program, and extract both mods to their own folders as well. I ran into an issue extracting the detailed map with the Windows extractor, so if you have that same problem, try another program like 7-Zip. With everything extracted, let's run binary as an administrator. Make sure to always run it like this. Then click User Mode and navigate to the install.end file for the Upscaled HUD mod. With that selected, then navigate to your Underground 2 install folder. After a second or two, it should display a pop-up asking if you want the HD unlimiter textures. Feel free to say yes here if you'd like, then give it some time to install, click OK, and yes to save files. But don't launch the game yet. Let's now do this process again for the detailed map. Select the install.end file, navigate to your installed directory, and do not select the beta map unless you want to download that mod separately, and then again, once it's done, click OK, yes to save files, and that's it. Feel free to boot up the game here again, just to make sure everything's working. And with that, let's move on to ZMenu. This is effectively a cheating tool for Underground 2 that most players just use for its camera functions. Although the extra options mod we installed with UG2Net earlier does come with a functioning Freecam, the one in ZMenu is much better, and if you want to be able to take some awesome open world screenshots, you're much better off using ZMenu. Download the mod here, then open the zip and move all the files into your game's install directory except for the .asi and .ini files. Those instead go in your scripts folder. And like with all other mods, you can open the .ini file to change the settings and keybinds. If you happen to run into error 126 when booting the game after installing this, then you need to download and install the VC redistributable I linked in the description. In order to use this tool in-game, the default keybind is F7. And from here, you can navigate to the camera options in order to enable the Freecam, and you can do things like turn off the HUD, which is great for pictures and cinematic movie shots. Obviously, being a cheat tool, ZMenu does have a lot of other options you can play with, but I won't get into those here. You can mess with that on your own. Now let's talk about another amazing feature that modders have revived, the ability to play online. This is achieved with the NFS Online Reborn mod that can be downloaded from their Discord, which I've linked in the description. Simply download the PC mod, move both files into your Underground 2 install directory, and you're done. Now you can head to the Online tab in-game, create an account, and browse lobbies or create your own. Keep in mind that everyone in the lobby needs to have the same mods in order for things to work. So for example, if you're using UG2Net and modded cars, you won't be able to play with someone just running the vanilla game. For this reason, it's best to coordinate lobbies on Discord or wherever else in order to make sure everyone is synced up. For another option, you can also use GameRanger to play Underground 2 through its LAN feature. I won't cover the whole process for that, but in short, you can just download GameRanger and search through the program for lobbies, and then use the in-game LAN feature to connect. Alright, now let's wrap up this video by talking about car mods. There are a ton of add-on cars out there with a wide range of quality, and ultimately there's only a handful that I would personally highly recommend. Without a doubt, the car pack I would recommend the most is Bayview's Best. This is a flawless mod pack that adds 3 new cars to the game and works seamlessly with other mods we've talked about up to this point. The car models are top-notch, there's tons of great customization, and the cars themselves are very well balanced and themed to the correct era and style of Underground. Let's walk through the install process. We'll be using Binary again to install all car mods from here on out. So download and extract the mod, then open Binary as an administrator and navigate to the correct .end file, then over to your install directory, and from here, just follow the on-screen prompts, selecting the cars and options that you want. Click OK, save, and don't boot. That's essentially the whole process for every car mod that you should be using. Just open Binary, select the .end file and your install directory, select your options, save, and you're done. In addition to Bayview's best, there are a few more modded cars that I think are good quality. This S15 and the NA2 NSX from Darkness, just about all of the cars from NFS 2019, he's got a great roster, and this 911 by JM Dags, which is a unique but still fitting addition to Underground 2's world. Of course though, there are many other options, so to give you a quick idea of what to look for, just make sure that the mod you're installing is an add-on, not a replacement. Replacement cars will replace an existing vehicle in the game, and it's a pretty outdated way of modding cars into Underground. Because modding in Underground 2 has changed a lot recently, generally speaking, the best mods you'll find are ones that have released within the last few years. And on that topic, I would avoid the Olympic Imports download from NFS mods. It's an outdated mod and an outdated link. Instead, if you do want some of the cars from that pack, you can use the link I provided in the description, which has been updated to use the modern binary installer. Outside of that, of course, feel free to experiment with other add-on cars. There are a ton out there, and many of them will work just fine. Just be aware that they might have worse models or missing customization or other minor imperfections. And finally, just as a reminder for what I said earlier, if you're going to install a new car mod, you need to create a new profile in order for it to show up in-game. And folks, that brings us to the end of this video. I know it was a lot to cover, but hopefully I was able to give you all the information you need to get started with a modern playthrough of Need for Speed Underground 2. Thanks for watching. Feel free to comment with any questions or suggestions, and I'll see you in the next video.